our mud and Mandela effect UFO style people, Anunnaki giants. You know the ones. That's all I need to see. And look at this strange shit in here. Tree of life, symbolism stuff in the background as usual. He's just got the look, hasn't he? We know the look. This look here too, unfortunately. No Adam here. Yes, and it seems like we've got the Amazons all over us here. Look at Amazilla verticalis. And as I thought was going to happen, these people don't want to know about things like Egypt was built by Napoleon. And here they are going to really knock that look right in the middle of everything, clearly saying that exactly. So you can see they are here to muddy the waters, and all the good work that's been done by a few rare channels. Now there's a whole mud flood of mudders, and they're going to pull everything out of the hat, and the usual stuff, Anunnaki, reptilians, Amazilla. Zilla is a reptile, so this is a female man-like reptile. It just shows you, doesn't it, straight away. And a quick look at Amazilla, and he's got the Ouroboros featured straight here, and look at this with the inked up look here. Totally inked. I mean, some people have one tattoo here, a few tattoos, but when you see this all inked up here like the illustrated man, well, then you know you're onto something. And could well be fake too. And look, our favourite friend here, there we go. So you see birds of a feather flocking together, holographic skies and this sort of stuff. So no wonder Amazilla just cannot handle the fact that the pyramids are new. Oh, another one of these that's appeared here and nothing work that I've done is Nebuchadnezzar's ghost, and we can see he's quite happy with Lekki. And there's one culture, one destiny idea. All these buildings built in 1800s, and they're going to say they were covered in mud and they were built by Tartarians 1002 and 3 and 4 and whatever they're going to say ago. But we know that's not the case. Built by the Germans in the 1800 period. All these gates, some of them they say 300 AD, and then there's others that they say are built like the one in Bulgaria, only built in the I think in the 20th century. Many of them built in the 1800s, 1900s, and people are going to say that they're 1,000 years old too, are they? A double T. But no one's ever going to cover that. They're not going to cover the true things. They're going to run with all this rubbish. And Joanne Steen here, looking good, Joanne, with the jack. Jack is, of course, one of the favourite symbols for the tea people, long-necked gooses. We're going to have, some bits of things that might be okay in the channel, a little bit here of good information, and then we're going to load it up with all sorts of stuff, including this one here. Tsunamis, big cataclysmic events. This here, full circle, alright, the circle gang. And look at Joanne Steen has got this here. Look who she's recommending. That just should tell you too. The 33 going on. Richie from Boston, albeit that one is a related channel, but no doubt one of these channels will be friendly with Richie from Boston. Now, they deliberately twist information, and a lot of people don't look hard enough and just accept it. I heard somebody suggest, how did they build this in 1821? So they only settled Sydney in 1788, so that's only around 30 years, and suddenly we've got this really big basilica. Well, the thing is, this wasn't built in the 1900s. They just don't read the information properly. It's all just the way they twist things. Yes, there was some church built there in 1821, but it's not the church that's standing there today. But they want to tell you it is. And as I said, most people don't look hard enough and accept that. Oh, well, it must be. The Tartarians must have built it. That's the only answer that they can come up with. Well, here you go. Construction in the 1920s. And you see, the original priest had a big vision of big spires, and this was told to us as kids, because there were no spires on there when I was younger. And if you have a look there today, there is, not albeit I don't think as grand as they planned either. But they added these things in 2000 and something. So, you know, there should be one, I'd say, here too. There should be three much bigger ones, I would imagine. But the budget constraints. But built, as I said, not in 1821. So the spreading of this information, and something similar with the cathedrals in San Francisco. There's one that was replaced, a real modern one that's replaced a big old one was there, and they were saying, oh, how was that built? Well, it wasn't. It was the other smaller one that was built in 1854 when they first settled San Francisco. Here's the 1854, and as you know, they say 1849 was the time of a lot of people coming into this area, but the Spanish had it before. No doubt there was more population there. They're hiding something here, and they say a lot about convict labour, etc. Oh, how could the convicts? Well, I mean, they had free settlers who were builders, military people who were builders, and no doubt some of the convicts were builders, and they certainly trained people. They're in a new land, they need more builders, so any young convict would be turned into an apprentice, and therefore, you know, has certain privileges that once you're involved in certain things, that's how the convict system worked a bit. You know, if you lifted your game, they gave you a certain free ticket, as it were. And look, 20 to 1. 2 into 1 always. Yes, and fly from evil, the evil mud flooders. Look, this is brickwork here. Nothing too mysterious about any of these things. As I said, people say, well, how did convicts build it? Well, they had military over the top of them. And I said the military always, the biggest thing in military is demolition, but also construction. Controlled demolition and then construction. Yeah, so looking at Bulgaria and arches, I found something pretty interesting here. Seeing it's Philip Populus, just like Philip the Druze. That's the main pusher of this stuff to do with the mud flood. Now, some of these things are said, they say 1st, 2nd, 3rd century. Hadrian, Titus, all these ones. And then there's ones that they say only built in 1800s, like Napoleon's one, after Triumph. So we have a mixed bag of, you know, dates, but nothing in the middle of, you know. And I found this in India, interesting enough, and I'll do a video about India. So I think India's a lot of fraud too, like everywhere with finding fraud. Now, again, always having to be dug up, and this looks very clean for covered in mud. It'll be a little bit dirtier here on this side, you know, to give you a sort of, oh, that's clean, that must have been exposed, and this covered, etc. You know the tonsorial colours of the Barber at Seville. And look at the numbers, 2 by 3 for 33 and 303 for 33. So we know he's got this stamp all over this little idea here. But this, you know, really fitting in with what we're seeing at the moment, you know, the mud flood have to be excavated, just like Luxor, all these places. So this whole maze that they're creating with the mud flood is a big idea, and we saw how they are knocking the earlier work of Dave Johnson, myself, and a few other channels that have picked up on this and shown other elements of the fraud of history, the true frauds of history, and these people are going to push that these things are old, built by Tartarians, and we uncovered them from mud. There's one here on the right, again built by the Germans. I'm not sure whether it's 17 or 1800s, but that's when it was built for sure, as a tourist attraction, a theme park. Yes, that is the truth. The funny thing about this one here, what's of arch is this anyway? I can't see an arch. Can you see an arch here? It could just be a little toilet. Everything goes out through there. Who knows? But the tonsorial's all I need to see in the 33s. And knowing what we know about these historical frauds, go and watch my Beckley Teppy video. And again, that was something that Dave J channel had covered. Now, good to see that Dave J channel's back. He's got a new video up, so go and check that out. He'll probably make a comment on this video, so that way you'll be able to link to his channel. And anyway, that one in San Francisco seems like it all fell down, half of it they're saying, by the earthquakes and fires, etc. So, brick walls, I'm not really sure about all the history of this. It seems pretty murky. But here's an interesting one. Norton's been a naughty boy. You know, I was actually just doing some research on Mike McGee, because that's his song, allegedly done with his brother Willie Campbell type idea. And Emperor Norton collapsed in 1880, so I might have to look at this a bit further. This is quite an interesting story by itself. I'm finding this bit very hard to believe too, that the fires were hot, that they melted the church bells. They must have been pretty thin little church bells indeed. Ones I've seen, you know, you need a fair fire. I mean, fires just don't burn at the temperature that's required. You need a blast furnace to melt church bells. It just doesn't add up whatsoever. So certainly there's so much wrong. But the way these people carry on, look, you know, observe the time and fly from evil. Observing the time. I had a mate whose dad was a mason, and he inherited his little unit. This guy was a bit backwards, you know. Anyway, he had a clock in there that every 15 minutes it would ring. And a mate was staying with him just because he had to come up for another mate of ours who passed away, and he had to stay. That's the reason I went and visited this guy. And this thing was ringing every 15 minutes. My mate was looking to put his fist up, wanted to smash it. And so that's how I realised about this time business. This guy was just the low level, you know, first level degree mason, I guess, and his son, he got into it because his son's a bit simple, and the local sort of mason guys did look after the son a bit. That was their claim of the good work they do, I guess, but we weren't wearing it, especially the way they had this clock in his house every 15 minutes going ding, 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 every 15 minutes, all 24 hours. And when it was on the hour, it rang more times. Oh, it was a punishing thing. This is it, observing time, and you saw it was written on that clock. Here's the new video from Dave J here. So we'll put the link to this video in the description of this video, so you can go and check that one out. Good to see a new video back, and what he's talking about here really fits with what they're doing with the mud flood, destroying your peace of mind. Yes, and one of the links of the Amazilla channel gives you Tell Me What You Love channel, and here he is, look, talking about a funny thing happened with Mars. And what happens here? 7 minutes. And that's what none of these channels ever talk about, things like this. That's what you notice. They're going to discredit the Egypt stuff. They're not going to talk about this. They're not going to talk about the tea drinkers, because most of them are, if not all. It's the ones I've shown you just there have all clearly been. And so it's all about muddying the waters and pumping you full of Mandela effect. And you can see I wasn't kidding about this. Look, did a Mandela effect shift us to the mud flood reality? No reality mud flood, no Mandela effect. People talk about Mandela dying. Mandela, you know, there was never a report that Mandela died. Not at all. He was in jail, he got out, they made him the leader of South Africa. Well, fraudy, of course, you know, in real reality he's just a puppet, but just the way these people invent these things, and so many people who are either younger, so therefore they just haven't really got the experience and weren't there around at the time, and they bought into these rumours. And that's exactly what that video Dave was highlighting, the way that people bite. So we keep our cool, because getting angry is also the other thing that they want. I never get angry. I used to when I first did these videos, and I was naive. But as people have noticed, I've calmed down more and more. You've just got to realise that that's what they want. They want you biting. Well, we're not biting, but we're just laughing. Laughter is the best medicine on this one. Mandela and Muddela effect. And one of the big ones with the Mandela effect is the Ford logo. Now, a friend of mine's got a 38 maybe pickup truck, Ford. Very old wooden-sided thing. And I was at his place there, and it sits in the little carport out in the backyard. And I checked out the logo, and of course it was this one here. And of course it's been changed to the universal thing of CERN. I've never seen a logo that looks like this. I think there's a rare Ford that doesn't have the curl on the F, but it doesn't have all this business here that I've ever seen. And I checked out a few other older Fords, like Little Laser from the 80s. I saw a fairly old one. Again, every one of them has had this, and the same, I've got a video myself on a VW Combi, because I was saying how the VW thing didn't have a split in the V and the W. Well, my video from a number of years ago that I took clearly shows that the VW did have the split in it. And this is the Ford logo that I remember, except there may be a few models that don't have this thing, but they certainly don't have that curl. And there's older Ford ones where it's not as fancy at all. I'm sure you've probably seen them if you've ever looked at any of this. But they're just running with stuff that, has people scratching their head as far as I'm concerned. And putting the ideas, suggesting into their mind, and then people start to believe it. Now, there was an old Combi uptown one day, and it was in the early times of YouTube. You can see, look, 2010, 9 years ago. And I was playing around with synthesizers and a bit of music at the time, and just making them track up, and I made this silly little thing that I called Zombie Combi. Now, in that, it clearly shows the split. So if you want to believe CERN could come in and change my video, because I've got the original of this video and the one on YouTube, and they've both got the split. So somehow it's been getting around the old CERN Mandela and changing these things inside wherever they are. Well, that is a real leap of faith to me. But of course, people who have these big leaps of faith are the ones that easily conned into this herd collective mentality of anger and confusion. And that is the big one that they're striving for every time. The Mandela effect, we could well call this. And that's what none of them are saying, how the Arch of Titus is not that old. You can see the things here look too well marked. They started out discrediting Rome with New Earth Channel, but somehow now it's grown to it's all Tartar. It's a worldwide empire that built all these things. Then they got covered in mud. We've had to clear the mud. And the most ridiculous of all is the buildings built on slopes that have the windows only small and then getting larger as you go down the footpath side on. And this is true in San Francisco and Sydney a lot because they're very hilly cities. And they're trying to say, look, there's the proof of the mud flood. Just outrageous. They think all buildings have got to be built on a flat, level ground of some sort. I mean, they come across a city like Sydney, they just build things where they do and excavate one side and make it level, of course. Of course, one side's going to have an extra story and it's going to be sunken in. Plus, they're saying about basements. I mean, all buildings should have basements for storage reasons and helps with the foundation. And also the excavation was often used to, in Sydney's case, to supply the sand for the mortar. Because Sydney happens to be blessed with having both the sandstone and on top of it, a layer varying from a few inches up to many feet of really good builder's sand. And the sand can be used to fill up other areas, of course, as well. So it's a product. I mean, it's not garbage. And why not dig in and get some of it out? They sold sand in a building in the eastern suburbs of Sydney that was built. And a guy told me at the time they got about 20,000 because it was a very white sand that was good enough for glass manufacture. And they took a heap of truckloads away. Because it was just worth too much money to use in any other way. But back in the day, they made resource and use out of things. And just this ridiculous idea that a building can't be built on a slope, it has to be mud flood. Yes, they show buildings just like this here, and they say, oh look, It's all flooded over here. Absolute rubbish. This was built like this, dug in the earth just like this, built square in the ground, and that's just how it is. Nothing mysterious whatsoever to me, and only if you want to believe really strange Mandela effect ideas. Because they've got a lot of people predisposed to these ideas, aliens and Roswell and so many channels and people I know of in my life that have been hooked on aliens, you might say. Now they've got them hooked on mud flood, and they throw up an image like this and say, there's the proof. Now, if you went to this area, you'd find this a huge big slope. I can think of a lot of examples of this sort of thing in Sydney and Brisbane, Australia. A lot less in Melbourne because it's built on a flat base compared. Sydney and Brisbane are full of buildings that look like this, and there was no flood. You can sometimes see when they dig up parts of the road or somewhere, you can see the original soil. Now, I think I have some qualifications for this. I'm a horticulturist, and a big part of learning about that in Australia is soil science, and I was always top of the class on my essays and exams on soil science. And I did particularly hone in on the Sydney profile, which clearly shows sand and then sandstone, and in between the sand and sandstone is a thin layer which we call coffee rock. And that's it. And it's quite simple, and anyone can dig somewhere in Sydney and find this profile, and there is just sand and then rock. And it's really good quality sandstone for buildings. So people saying, how did they build this in Sydney with convicts? Because they just dug up ground and they could quarry stone everywhere, and they had sand everywhere. And they're also on the sea, so they could get the lime, etc. as well, to make like early versions of cement. It's all explainable in Sydney. Sydney defeats the mud flooders totally. If anyone's there, I could stand there and show them the soil profile and say, where's the mud? Yes, I couldn't find a soil profile for Sydney straight up, but I saw this here, and this is good enough to describe something. Here is your bedrock, and if you can see, there is vegetation here. Well, this is growing on the sand that's on top of the bedrock, and sometimes it's only a few feet thick. These trees, a lot of them can grow in fairly shallow soils. Where you get deeper soils, you get a few different more fruiting trees like lily pillies. But on the top here, it's Angophora castata and tea tree, etc., and they grow in very, very thin soils. And it's just sand on top of sandstone. And this is a vast area. All over Sydney is the same. And there is no muddy soils in Sydney near the coast. When you go inland from Sydney a bit, you start to get the clayier soils. But certainly not in the Sydney coastal regions. And this is a good example of what I'm saying. And I mean, I wish I could show you a closer in profile. You'd see that this vegetation is, depending on in the depths, the soil's a bit thicker, but on the tops, it's thinner, and that's all it's growing in. Very, very thin soils. And again, no, it doesn't matter where you are in Sydney, you do not find this clayey, muddy remnants of a great mud flood. It's pure white sand. This reminds me of the soils that grew up here, slightly grey, black level at the top, white sand layer, and then bedrock. And that is what you get. Where is the mud? Amazing how these people all talk to each other. Look, Amazilla and Nebuchadnezzar and Amazilla, having a little conversation here and trying to discredit the pyramid go, you see? And look at this here, this is Philip. And Philip has no top of the head at all, now does he? We know the look. We know the Philip Drews look. And they talk about the debris here. We know what the debris is for. They scatter stuff around when they build these freak shows because they want people to go, oh, it must have been greater and bigger. As I showed you at Gobel Tepley, they've already got artist impressions showing further construction to the left, as it were, of what they've shown so far, and that happens to be where there's a bit of a hill. So they're about to excavate that one and discover more Gobel Tepley, and they've already pre-programmed it. That's the story of debris. I mean, these guys just do not want to face any real facts. They just skirt around and then pull out Anunnaki, Mandela effect, mudfloods, Greater Tartaria, anything that's a bit grey area and a bit strange. And that's how they're going to operate, because they're muddying the waters. Now here's one from Bulgaria finally. It's the Gates of Trajan. And it says how it's, look, the classic word, the restored fortress gate. Restored, alright. Look at this brickwork here. Look, it's the whole older stuff. Well, this was sitting up by itself and they had to brick all this up. What's it go here? And it's another fraud on fraud out of Bulgaria. Good place for a fraud. And this is what's going to happen now. Can't you see Tartaria becoming the new place on the tourist map? Go and see the new Egypt. It's probably getting built now as we speak, hidden away on the other side of the Urals, as it were. Or this side, wherever. And of course the Gog and Magog ideas all coming from there too. What's it, Portugal? Yes, there's a lot in these fortresses, that's for sure, but none of them look that old. Medieval, 1700s, 1800s, going to see most of them out. And so many, the restored version. That's what I really laugh at when I see that. And here's an interesting bit here. This is large old Bulgarian house numbers. TV. Here's the Bulgarian embassy in London. Certainly needs to be researched a bit more on Bulgaria. Certainly the people in Tatarstan are meant to be Bulgars anyway, by official history. So what a mess. You know, designed to be, and these people are going to make it messier and messier again, and run around with their Anunnaki and Abazilis. I mean, the names of the channels, the whole attachment of them all. And people who are saying to me, oh, you used to be good, JS, but no, I'm unsubscribed. And I've never heard or seen from them before. They suddenly just decided to comment on my mudblood, but they haven't commented on earlier Egypt videos and many other topics I've done.
Okay, so if Prince William decides to come and get a tattoo in our shop, I would suggest to him a Jerusalem cross, because this was tattooed on his ancestors before. And I would suggest our 500-year-old wooden stamp that has the Jerusalem cross on it. That most probably was the same one that was used to tattoo his ancestors, probably.
Well, very big news getting around the web here, of course, Prince William off to Israel. So it's just creating quite a disturbance, of course. Prince William touted Antichrist, part of the general script here of the Tea Party, and as we can see, the T's are prominent, the Z's, around 4 7s, and interesting enough, 52 cards, of course, but there's your 7, and your 8 4 1 to 13 for 4, so 7 4 4 7 7 4, or 11 11 11, 6 11s, you get 66, so they step away to 666, isn't it? But I'll have to look at this more. But Ra, of course, Raz, the red, and what that guy said about he should get a Jerusalem cross.
In the Holy Land, and 200 years before that in Egypt. We are Christian Coptic, and we have been doing tattoos for 700 years. Nowadays, we are doing modern techniques using modern.
Well, yes, we have the Fez here, and the Coptic guy, and 5 plus 7 for your 12, of course. There's 111. See here it's 700 years.
We have been doing tattoos
700
for
years.
700 years.
For 700 years. Well, we can see this is going to be a very controversial tour indeed. Jordan, Israel and occupied Palestine. We'll have to keep an eye on this over the next few weeks. Is that Haig? Looks a bit like Haig, I think it's somebody else. That's purple tie. Yes, quite a little bit of interesting history in recent years to do with the royal family in Israel. Slowly coming in more and more is the way the thing runs here. And interesting dates, June 24, of course, the 66 idea, and June 28, 61 for a 7. Interesting enough how it relates here scientifically to the date June 6 as well, I might add. And that's going to be marching into Jerusalem. The birth of two interesting kings for sure, Carloman I, King of the Franks, and see Henry VIII of England on that very day.
A landmark visit to the Middle East this summer. This will mark the first official visit by a member of the British royal family to Israel and the Palestinian territories. The prince will also make a stop in Jordan. No British royal has ever made an official visit to Israel.
And here's a nice little twist to the story I thought I'd just throw in.
Duke Ekbra's mother, that is Prince William's great-grandmother, Princess Alice, is buried there. She was seen as a very heroic figure in terms of the last World Wars, World War II, in terms of the treatment of Jewish people. And there was a long series of negotiations because she wanted to be buried in Jerusalem. It took 20 years for those negotiations to take place. Prince Philip himself was not even allowed to be at the reburial of his mother in the...
So yeah, there's been a frenzy of videos, of course, from certain sections here. And what's interesting, how many views these people are let get. So it's not as if they want to hold this information up either. Worth really sort of stepping aside and analysing the whole issue here of really what's happening. And unfortunately not many people do. They certainly don't call the T-section idea out for these ones. And here's David poking his head in here and we'll snake up the ladder. And of course we've got this thing too, another fraud of history. So it's fraud on fraud anyway. But interesting times to say the least. And certainly it was the British monarchs that created Israel in the beginning, and now it's sort of like the fruit is bearing. How many views? It's just pushed by the tube here, and actually I was watching one where it was a Chinese guy, and it was from BBC International, and it had a hell of an amount of views too, not as many as this maybe, but on the same subject.